The Aseret forms the reading on the first day of Shavuot, and the question is even the custom of standing for it. Are you standing for it and saying that this has a greater kedusha than something else in the Torah? So generally people get around that by standing up a little before it's read and sitting down a little after it's read. The Brisker have no problem with that because they stand for the entire Kriyas Torah anyway, like Chazar Tashatz. But the question of the Aseret Dibrot was at one time part of the liturgy, the Matbea Shel Tevilah, and it was eliminated. And I'd like to point out that it was eliminated for a theological reason. In other words, the Matbea Shel Tevilah is halachic structure of the liturgy, and there's a theological caveat that why it was not written. So to begin with, we read the Mishnah in Tamid, which talks about the service in the Bet HaMikdash, the beginning of Parak Hey. Amar lahem hamununa baruch hu baracha achat, the person who was in charge of, they had a brief service before they began the Tamid of Shachar. Baruch bracha achat vein baruch hu karu aseret devarim. They read the 10 Commandments, Shema v'hayim Shema v'yomer, and the 3 paragraphs of the Shema, and then they go on to something that seems to be a rudimentary Shemona Esrei. So the question was that this was part of the service of the temple, which not only the Zmanei Tevilah follow the korbanot. In other words, the shachrit, the mincha offering, and then arvit mariv can be said all night because what was left was burned on the altar. But the question becomes, why was it dropped? And the answer of the Bavli is mipnei taromet haminim, because of the objections or the arguments. Taromet can be interpreted in a number of ways of the meaning of the sectarians. Now, minim refer to heretics, people who are still part of the community. Many people say that the minim are the early Christians who begin as a Jewish sect. But Bifnei Taromet Haminim, and this was the Gemara here in Brachot Yud Bet Amud Aleph says that that basically that they begulin bikshu likrot kain, that outside of the Bet HaMikdash they wanted to include in the Matbea Shel Tevilah the reading of the Aseret HaDevarim. This was probably after the temple was destroyed. And the rabbis objected to that. They said, no, it batlum mipnei taromet haminim. That this is eliminated because of the objections of the meaning. The Bavli doesn't say what those objections were. And that becomes the question. In fact, they say that in Surah and in Hardia that they wanted to do it, which is interesting. Places in Babylonia where there were no Christians or very few Christians, unlike Eretz Yisrael where there were many, and therefore they probably didn't understand the reason why it was prohibited. Removed, but the answer is given Mipnei Taromet Hamitim. You look at the Yerushalmi in Brachot, chapter 1, Halakhah 5. The text there is interesting. Is Mipnei ma korin shtei parshiot halalu b'chol yom? Why do we read the Shtei Parshiot means V'ahavta and B'hayim Shemoah and Vayomer. Why do we read it every day? A number of answers are given. Rabbi Levi Omar, mipnei she'aseret hadibrot klulin bahen, that in the Kriyat Shema are the Aseret HaDevarim are embedded therein, so that therefore, if they're embedded therein, you don't have to say them because they are embedded in the Kriyat Shema. And the first example is Anochi Adonai Elohecha, is in the Aseret HaDevarim, is parallel to Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So, and then they go on, for example, Lo Tignov, which in this version means stealing property. Some say Lo Tignov means kidnapping. V'asafta degancha v'lo degano shel chaverecha, that you should gather your own produce and not the case. And then Shema v'hayim Shemoa v'yomer, she'eser hadavarim hein gufei shel Shema. They are the essential points in the full Kriyat Shema. Matan of Rabbi Yishmael Bar Nachman Omar Tarveon Amrin Bedain Have Shiyu Korin Aseret HaDevarim B'chol Yom. V'nahein Ein Korin. Why don't we read it? He said, Mipnei Tanat Haminim, and then they give what their taina, what their complaint was. Shaloyu Omrim Elu Levadan Nitnu LaMoshe Misinai. These alone were given to Moshe at Sinai. Now, these alone mean that the early Christians or other sectarians were interested in you look at the Aseret HaDibrot, they're very general, they're klalim. So they're interested in the big concepts, but they're not interested in the pratim. They're interested in the klal, but not in the prat. And if you look at that, then this becomes a question. And why is there interested in the klal and the prat? And if you think of the fact that Bnei Israel were like Gerim at Har Sinai, the Gemara in Yevamot Mem Zayin Amud Aleph says that when a person comes to present himself for Gerut, first of all, you say that how persecuted the Jews are, how dangerous it is to be a Jew, which unfortunately is the case these days. I'm speaking while we have this encampment on the pro-Palestinian encampment on the grounds of the University of Toronto, where I'm in my new office there now. But anyway, you give the mitzat mitzvot kalot mitzat chamurot. You give them a sampling of lighter mitzvot that are easier to do, or these seemingly peripheral, and mitzvot chamurot. And the Meiri, Rabbi Menachem HaMeiri, the Bet HaBechira, says there that the reason is that the non-Jews, he's referring to Christians and probably Muslims as well, don't have mitzvot yeterot. That's the language he uses. In other words, they have general mitzvot, but you tell them little pintalach that you have to have 2 sets of dishes, or this sort of thing. This is going to discourage them. What's the point of all of these points? So therefore, if they're willing to accept not only the klalim but the pratim, then this is the case. And there's an old saying that people who miss the forest for the trees. The people who miss the forest for the trees are people who only see the little pintalach, the dikduke mitzvot. I don't say that pejoratively, but miss the big picture. I've seen people who've gone through yeshiva education, who remember certain things from the Gemara, but when it comes to the yesodot, the fundamentals of Judaism, they're ignorant. And then when they get exposed to other ideologies and other philosophies, they have no answer. On the other hand, there are people who miss the trees for the forest. And in other words, they're only interested in the general things, and they're not interested in the particularities. So therefore, there's a dialectic in Judaism between the important basic principles. The Rambam says at the end of his commentary on the Perush Mishnayot, at the end of Brachot, he said, I like nothing better than teaching the Yesodot, teaching the foundations. Because his criticism of many Jews at that time is that they had no answer to the taromet of the Talmud of the Christians and the Muslims, who said that Judaism is a religion of pots and pans. People said that. So that therefore they need to do these questions. But if it doesn't result in the specifics, then it is vacuous and has no location in the real world. I just close with this. The great philosopher Immanuel Kant said that percepts without concepts are blind. In other words, the little things we experience without a conceptual context for them are blind. Concepts without percepts are dumb. They're not talking about anything. So I would say that klalim without pratim are dumb, and pratim with klalim are blind. And therefore, we need a dialectic of klal and prat in terms of teaching Torah. Amen.